All right, so we are joined here tonight by Sam Goldberg, who's the Director of Education at the Nathan and Esther Pell's Holocaust Education Resource Center, or HERC for short, so in case you hear that acronym. And HERC has a very special place in my heart because I actually interned there my senior year of college when I was at Marquette and a student at Hillel Milwaukee, and it was just an amazing experience, and I think we're so lucky to be able to hear from a local Holocaust survivor tonight because these stories are really precious. And so to be able to bear witness to this is super important. So for the time being, when we're not in discussion, I'm going to ask everyone to please mute themselves so that we can focus on our speaker. And then I'm going to introduce Michaela Brook, who is our Jewish Life and Learning Chair on our student board, and she's going to lead us in candle blessing. So if you have candles nearby, we're going to say that prayer together and then also share a song. And Delilah, I will have you ready to share the screen? Okay, cool.
Hello, sorry. Hi, okay, my name is Michaela. I am the Vice President of Jewish Life and Learning, no, what is it called? The Chair of Jewish Life and Learning on the student board. And I'm gonna be leading the blessing over the candles. So, here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen. And now I can't remember what I'm supposed to do.
We have you singing Lador Vador.
I couldn't remember if I was passing it on or singing, but I will sing. So this is a song called Lador Vador, which means from generation to generation. And we thought it would be fitting for this occasion because we're so lucky to have a survivor of the Holocaust here to speak to us. Hold on, sorry, I have to get my guitar out. Here we go. Stop it. We are gifts, we are blessings, we are history and song. We are hope, and we are healing. We are learning to be strong. We are words, we are stories, we are pictures of the past. We are carriers of wisdom, not the first and not the last. Dor vador nagid golecha. Dor vador we protect this chain. Generation to generation. Vador, these lips will praise your name. Dor Vador, nagid golecha. Vador, Vador, we protect this chain. From generation to generation. Adore, adore, these lips will praise your name. Thank you. Oh my gosh, stop. And now I will pass it to Ben Stern.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Michaela, for leading the blessings. It sounds fantastic, as always. So my name is Ben Stern. I'm the Lieutenant Master of AEPI's Mu Epsilon chapter, as well as a member of the Hillel Milwaukee Student Board. That being said, much of my extracurricular life has centered around making our campus a safe and educational environment for Jewish expression. And that's why I cannot stress how important tonight's Shabbat service is. Tonight, we have the honor of hearing the story of Edith Herzenson Pomp. She is the daughter of Mendel and Ellen Herzenson. Edith is both a child victim of the Holocaust and a survivor of it. Her parents were forced to flee their homeland of Poland because of the Nazis. As a result of the Holocaust, Edith's parents lost their own parents, their siblings, as well as their cousins. Edith and her family were victimized, and she was born while her parents were hiding in a very rural area of Asia called Uzbekistan, a very harsh place to raise a child. They were the only family members to survive. Edith's story is one of persistence and bravery, a reminder of humanity's ability to survive in the most bleak circumstances. To hear Edith's story from her mouth is a historical privilege, something that we should remember for as long as we can. So, without any further ado, Edith Pomp.
Well, thank you for that very nice introduction. And Kayla, that was a beautiful beginning for Shabbat. Thank you. My name is Edith Hershenson Pomp, and I'm the daughter of Mendel and Ellen Hershenson. I'm a child victim of the Holocaust, not just a survivor. I believe the word survivor doesn't give an adequate picture of who I am. Survivor means an individual who managed to live despite difficult conditions. I'm a survivor, but a victim as well. A victim is a person cheated or harmed by others. Because of the Nazis, my parents were displaced from their homeland in Poland. As a result of the Holocaust, my parents lost their parents, which would have been my grandparents, their siblings, my aunts and uncles, their children, my cousin. Because of the Holocaust, I was cheated out of grandparents, aunts, and an uncle, as well as cousins. My family and I were victimized. And here actually is a picture. I don't know how well you can see it. This is my mother and my aunt and another relative. My mother was the only one that survived. Here is a picture of my grandparents and my mother and my grandpa. They did not survive. I also have a picture of my uncle who lived in Lutz and had a little store, and his wife and beautiful daughter. None of them survived. That's my dad in the center. The only one that survived in this picture was my dad. That's a sister, and that's a first cousin right next to him. I was very lucky that those pictures somehow were salvaged. I don't know how they managed to save these pictures. Here's a picture in Poland of, again, my cousin and some friends and another relative. No one in this picture survived. And so when I discuss the word victim with my sons, he said, victim is such a harsh word with no positives, only evil and destruction. Those who survived were forever branded, not only by the tattooed numbers, but by the memories of their losses and suffering. Each survivor's reaction was different. and was different. My parents didn't much discuss the murdered loved ones with their own children. They never discussed family experiences they had growing up in Poland. We knew that they loved their families and missed them very much. Discussing their families with their own children would have made their hearts heavy. I also believe that both my parents felt guilty for having abandoned their families and survived themselves. I said earlier that my parents were Holocaust survivors. They were never in death camps, but nonetheless, they suffered considerably. Their siblings and families most likely died in death camps or in the pogroms. My grandparents, both sets, probably died in a concentration camp like Auschwitz. My parents survived because of luck, sheer chutzpah, which interprets as nerve, as well as staying 1 foot ahead of the situation. My father was from a small shtetl or village in Poland called Zamość. He had 5 sisters, 4 of them were married with families. None of them survived. My mother came from a neighboring village called Tyszowicz. My mother's brother, Zanvil, lived in a larger city called Lutz. He was married to a beautiful woman called Hinda. They had a lovely daughter, Lola. My uncle and aunt owned a little grocery store in Lutz. My mom lived for a short time in Lutz to help her brother at the store. My aunt Hinda, Uncle Zanvil, and Lola perished as well. The Jews of Lutz formed a second largest Jewish community in pre-war Poland after Warsaw. German troops occupied Lutz on September 1st of 1939. In early 1940, ghettos in the northwestern section of Lutz were established by Germans. About 160,000 Jews were forced into small ghetto area. Living in conditions in the ghetto was horrendous. Very little running water and a few sewers. Forced labor. Many died of starvation and disease. In January of 1942, German authorities began to deport Jews to Chelmna, killing center. By September of 1942, 70,000 Jews went to Chelmna. In the spring of 1944, the Nazis destroyed the Lutz ghetto. In June and July of 1944, the Germans resumed deportation from Lutz, and 3,000 Jews were deported to Chelmna. The surviving ghetto resistors were deported to the killing center of Auschwitz, Birkenau in August of Birkenau in 1944. They were told that they were going to work camps in Germany. My father was a wheat dealer. He heard rumors that Russians were closing in from one direction and the Nazis from another. So Mendel asked his fiancée, Chaya Hammer, to run away with him. He tried to convince the rest of the family to flee with them. They told my parents that they couldn't leave at that time, but maybe later. They could meet up with them. My parents got married while on the run. They were hiding in the forest with other Jews. There was a rabbi there who was also on the run. The rabbi married several couples along with my parents at the same time. They never received a ketubah or a marriage certificate. They were legally married under Jewish law. Within a short time, they were captured by the Russians and transported via cattle car to a Siberian work camp. The work camps were systems of forced labor camps during Joseph Stalin's long reign as a dictator of the Soviet Union. The work camps were called gulags, known as in Russia as corrective labor camps. The gulag system had over 3,000 camps. The largest camp had 25,000 prisoners. The medium camp had about 24,000 to 5,000. The smallest camps had 5,000 or less. 65,000 people died in those camps. either in the camp or while being transported to the camp. My parents were sent to a gulag in Siberia. Siberia is well known for its long, harsh winters with January average temperatures of 13 below. Siberia also had an extensive history of use by Russians and Soviet government as a place for prison, labor camps, and internal exile. Summer temperatures in Siberia reach between 50 and 63 degrees. Conditions of the labor camps were brutal. Prisoners worked 14-hour days in extreme weather. Many died of starvation, disease, or exhaustion. Some were executed. Some Russian prisoners never made it. They died on the trains, which were actually cattle cars. They were not tortured, but they were worked or starved to death. For 14 hours hard labor, they earned a loaf of wormy, stale bread. My parents decided that in order to survive, they would have to escape from the Siberian forced labor camp. Very, very few prisoners ever escaped. Their plan worked. My father pretended to fall at work, and as a result, he pretended he also was paralyzed. He was taken to the infirmary. At night, when the guards were not watching as carefully, he snuck out and met my mother in a designated area in the woods. They headed for a warmer climate and a safer place to hide out. They snuck on a cattle car train and ended up in Ziadin, Uzbekistan, around 2,000 miles. It's like a trip from Milwaukee to Los Angeles. Ziadin was also part of Russia. Islam was a dominant religion in Uzbekistan. My parents hid there for 4 years. I was born there. It was very primitive. It was a very primitive land with a warm climate. I was born in a mud shack, not in a hospital. A Muslim midwife delivered me. There is no record of my birth because my parents were in hiding. Dried mud from the wall was scraped and used as powder. At the age of 1, I developed a large boil on my behind, and my mother called in the midwife. She lanced it with a knife and sewed it up with a needle and thread. No antiseptic or anesthetic was used. I still have a large scar from it. My parents frequently had to leave me in a hut on my own while they went out to forage for food. Sometimes they even had to steal food from a neighboring market in order for us to survive. By the time I was 4 years old, I had survived malaria, which is spread by mosquitoes, yellow fever, which is another, which I also contracted. One time my mother and I had such high temperatures, our hair fell out. I had dysentery, which is from dirty drinking water, typhus, as well as severe malnutrition, any of which I was lucky to have survived. And I found a picture. Here's a picture that looks pretty much like the hut that I was born in. And they use camel dung and mud and water to put the walls together. After the war, the United States Armed Forces gathered survivors and brought them to displaced persons camps, or DP camps. We were put in the back of an army truck and transported to various places, various DP camps. And the DP camps were temporary residences for survivors and their families to live while they waited to go to their permanent homeland. The DP camps were large, complex, communal area. They had communal areas. The buildings were large and held many families, each each residential area was very small with communal showers. None of the living areas had their own showers or even bathrooms. Before being allowed to move into one of these communal apartments, we had to be deloused in the community shower with some type of disinfectant. I remember being very frightened that gas would come out of the shower heads. I must have heard about the murder of many Jews in these types of showers. We lived in a DP camp in Austria for about 6 months, and then we were transported to a DP camp in Germany. And we were transported by the United States Army. I remember being in the back of a military truck. I also remember my brother being born in a lager, which is another word for camp, or DP camp in Vilzig, Germany. I was 5.5 years old. While in Vilzig, my parents found a cousin who had survived. His name was Sheehan Hammer. Sheehan moved into our 2-room apartment with us. He slept on an army cot that we opened up in the evening and it folded up during the day. My mother washed clothes. She washed my brother. She washed the dishes in a large metal tub. She would boil water on the stove and fill the tub. Once, while playing and chasing my brother, he accidentally ran into the tub with one leg. He had very serious burns and almost died from them. In 1948, we were to go to Palestine, which is Israel now, on a ship called the Exodus. It was a United States-owned coastal passenger ship. Its other name was the Miracle of Israel number 10. It immigrated Jews to Palestine illegally. Palestine at that time was under British rule, and prior to boarding, everyone had to undergo a complete physical. Authorities found I had tuberculosis or TB, which is a very serious bacterial infection that settles usually in the lungs. I was also malnourished. As a result, my family and I were not allowed to leave. My cousin Shia left for Palestine and settled there. I never saw him again. And I have a picture of Sheehan and his bride. He got married before he went to Israel, and he survived. I was sent to because of the TB, I was sent to a children's sanatorium in Nuremberg, Germany. I was there for 3.5 years. My parents took turns coming to visit me by train every 2 weeks. I was well taken care of by the nurses and nuns. It was run by the Red Cross. They tried to cure us with lots of fresh air and fattening us up. But in reality, there really wasn't a cure for TB. We were there to really segregate us from the rest of the population to keep the TB from spreading. While a patient in Nuremberg, the Nuremberg prisoner of war trials were being conducted. After the war, some of those responsible for crimes committed during the Holocaust were brought to trial. 22 former Nazi officials went on trial. Hermann Göring and 11 others were sentenced to death. Adolf Hitler, Joseph Goebbels, and Heinrich Himmler committed suicide before going to trial. Göring killed himself before he could be executed. After the war, the Red Cross took over the building and made it into a children's sanitarium. I was there from 1947 1947 to 1950. The trials and executions were happening while I was in Nuremberg. On June 23rd, 1950, my sister Sarah was born in a lager, which means a small area, town, in Augsburg, Germany, on March 23rd, 1951. We came to America. We landed in New York Harbor. We stayed in New York for a month, and then we came to Wisconsin. We came here because my parents had two first cousins who were sisters in Milwaukee. An organization called the Jewish American Joint sponsored us. My parents were amazing people. They never seemed to harbor any anger or hate. They taught us to respect ourselves and our neighbors as well as all people, no matter who or what nationality or religious affiliation. They worked hard for their dreams. Their dream was to educate us so we could become responsible and respectable members of the community. My sister and I both became teachers, and my brother became a doctor. My family became United States citizens on December 18th, 1956. We went in front of a judge at the courthouse. My mother, my father, and I had to answer some questions about American history. My parents have been going to MATC in the evenings to prepare for about 3 years. My sister and brother didn't have to answer any questions about the United States history. They were too young. They told the judge that they loved America and also wanted to become citizens. Getting our citizenship papers was the proudest moment of our lives because now we were Americans. My parents knew that their children were safe and they could have a say in the government because now they could vote. I love America. My family was very lucky to have to be in the USA. But even in America, it wasn't always safe from anti-Semitism and prejudice. As a child, my mother liked to visit her cousin who owned a grocery store and lived behind their store. They had a daughter about 10 years older than me, and she was about 19 or 20. When we came over to visit, she would go hide in her room, close the door. I believe she shunned us because we were immigrants. When I was 11 and she was about 21, I went to an overnight camp. I was surprised to see that she was an arts and crafts teacher. I told everyone that Sylvia was my cousin. The others campers asked if this was true, and she said no, that she'd never met me before. She made me feel bad about myself and who I was. Later, I realized she had a problem with her attitude, not me. After completing 3 years of college at the University of Oshkosh, I had to take a modern math class before student teaching. I had made a friend with another Jewish student. She was from Fond du Lac. We were in the same class. The first day of class, Professor Hawley asked my friend and I to stay after class to speak with him. We had no idea why. He told us that after everybody left, he closed the door and we sat there and waited for him to speak to us. And he said to my friend and myself that he hated Jews. He said he was also from Fond du Lac. He knew of her family and hated them because they were Jews. He said he knew that I was a Jewess as well. He told us to drop out of his class or he would fail us. We had to stay and take his class in order to be able to student teach. At the end of the semester, even though we did well, he failed us. I had to stay in Oshkosh over the summer to retake the class with another instructor. I earned an A. I would not allow Professor Hawley to get his way. When it was time for me to student teach, Hawley made sure that I would be at the campus school. Somehow I was assigned to a campus elementary school. My supervising teacher must have been handpicked by Professor Howie. He made my student teaching experience a nightmare. That is a story in itself. I dropped out of the student teaching assignment even if it was past the dropout period without any penalty. I had gone to see a social worker on campus and they advised me to drop out. I was not penalized by the university. Mr. Morris, who was a teacher at that time, was disappointed because he was no longer had control over me. The next semester, I was assigned a new student teaching opportunity in Appleton, Wisconsin. My new supervising teacher would be Mr. Stevens. 2 days before I started in Appleton, Mr. Morris drove to Appleton to see Mr. Stevens. Mr. Morris told Mr. Stevens to fail me because Jews should not be teaching children. Mr. Stevens opened the door and told him to get out. Mr. Stevens related the incident to me on my first day in his class. He told me he would judge me on my ability as a teacher, not anything else. I earned an A grade for Mr. Stevens. I see open discrimination happening again. A new rise in anti-Semitism, in anti-Semitic language and hatred. Jokes about minorities have been happening more and more. Crimes against individuals and groups of minorities have been occurring more and more. Now synagogues have to hire security guards as well to keep their doors locked. Immigration is a virtual issue. Foreigners are not welcome. The only way to stop this kind of prejudice is through education at schools, places of worship, as well as homes. We cannot allow individuals who are ignorant and intolerant win out. Had I allowed my cousin, Professor Holly, or Mr. Morris to have their way and not fought back, my life would not have been the same. I had respect for myself and my family. I had confidence in myself and who I was. I did graduate with a teaching degree and taught for Milwaukee Public Schools for 35 years. If anyone ever tells you that the Holocaust never happened, or if you read something written by a Holocaust denier, remember, the facts that the Holocaust did happen is not even debatable. There is so much documented evidence of the atrocity, including eyewitnesses, film, as well as written evidence, including transcripts from the Nuremberg trials. The Holocaust was the most documented genocide that happened on this planet. 10 million people were murdered, 6 million Jews and 4 million others. Those who deny that it happened are merely showing their respect and support for what Hitler and the Nazi Party did. They are expressing their hatred and lack of morals and anti-Semitic attitudes. And here I'll show you, whoops. These are pictures of me in Germany, my family. This is before my sister was born. That's my brother and myself and my mother and dad. That's in a lager in Germany. And these are also, and this is my brother and I in Germany. That's where, after I got out of the sanatorium, you can see I gained a little weight. And that's me standing on the table. And a picture of my brother and myself. And this is a picture right before I left the sanatorium. That's my friend and her mother and my mother and myself. And we were supposed to go to Palestine, but we couldn't go because they told us after I got out of the sanatorium, my parents still wanted to go to Palestine. And the doctor said, Palestine is pretty primitive. conditions are not that good for somebody who just was released from a sanatorium. And so that's why we ended up coming to the United States instead. But my friend that was in that picture, her parents were told the same thing, but they chose to go to Palestine. Well, my friend never made it. She died a year after getting to Palestine. So the doctors were right. And my parents made the right decision.
Edie,
If
thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, it's just incredible that we get this experience. And I'm just going to open this up to that. If anyone has questions for Edie about her story, about her life, or about how she feels about what's happening today, feel free to direct those questions to me. I know I already have a question. I had a few, but you started talking about something else, and I'm just going to ignore my whole list. You were talking about like all of these things you experienced under Nazi occupation, under all of the prejudice you experienced in the United States. And I think that most people here, I mean, myself included, I consider myself fairly positive, but when faced with something like that, I can see myself becoming a fairly pessimistic and angry person. Yet I know that's not true. You still have a very positive outlook on life, and you're very personable, and you dedicated your life to teaching, even though you got turned down and failed for no good reason. Like, how is that possible? How are you still so positive and hopeful?
Because I saw that as not my problem. The problem lied with them. And I mean, my parents fought to get where they were. My parents never taught us hatred. My parents taught us respect. And if somebody disrespected you, you just turn and go walk away, get away from them. And if you have enough self-worth, you don't, those are people that are ignorant. You know that they're ignorant. It was rough fighting back with that teacher, because there were, in those days, I really had nowhere to go. You know, was the teacher to, where am I going to go? Nowadays, if people find that they're being discriminated against, a lot of times they have somewhere to go to complain about it.
Yeah, I mean, now I think that most of us consider in 2021 that we do have those places to go. There are protests in the street. There are people that are willing to fight for other people's rights. They're willing to fight and stand up for something that's wrong, but not always. I mean, it's so like, I think we still have a lot of work to do, but I just kind of want to hear your opinion, because you went through all of these different phases. Like, how do you see where we are today? Do you think we still have a long ways to go, or?
Definitely, I mean, our leadership previously brought out the worst people. People that were hiding in the cracks under the sidewalks were no longer afraid to come out and spew their hatred. Look at what's happening now with the Asian population. Terrible. I mean, you know, the Asian person can be standing on the street, just like, I don't know if you saw that video, but a lady was standing on the corner in New York, and somebody came up to her and beat the living daylights out of her because she was Asian. And that's happening a lot. Look what's happening to the Black population. That's been happening for a long time, but I think as Jews, we're more aware of this and we're more sensitive to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's every one of our responsibility to stand up for this sort of thing. But I do acknowledge, and I see that a lot, that people that have experienced this sort of oppression will then be more conscious of it and more willing to stand up.
Yeah, and the Asian woman that I was talking about, there were two people standing by the door watching it, and they didn't do anything. They could have gone out, you know, and helped, but they just stood by. And I don't know how you can live with yourself if you see somebody that happening to somebody and you stand by and do nothing.
I'm monopolizing the conversation, so I have to get
No,
some
you're not.
questions that some people wrote in. Someone asked if you ever made it to Israel or to Yad Vashem specifically.
Unfortunately, I never got a chance because after I got out of college, I got married and I was working and I had a family, and it was just, it got away from me. I never did. I'm sorry to say. My mother went 3 times.
Oh,
But
she
she-
did?
Yeah, my mother went 3 times because we did have some family. Like I told you, my cousin Sheehan went to Palestine, and he had relatives there. And my mother went to visit them.
I just have another question. I know that we are trying to move things along, but this is the first thing I wrote down, and it's going to bug me if I don't ask you. You said that your parents got married after they escaped the first concentration camp, or were
No, when they escaped from home in
from
Poland,
home.
they
And
hid in the forest and they got married.
Yes, that is the part that baffles me. What in the middle of them running for their lives made them stop in the forest and decide to get married right then and there?
Well, they were engaged. I don't know. They probably thought it would be wrong to be together and not be married. And I don't know how they survived, how the people that lived there were a number of people that lived in the forest. How did they eat? How did they survive? But they survived it for several months.
It's amazing. I know I can talk to you forever and ever. And if anyone has questions that they didn't get to or I didn't get to, I'm sorry. Feel free to reach out to me, or we can try and get Edie on another call sometime. Just because I know that she's a wealth of knowledge, and I mean, talking about the past and the present, you're just a super great person to talk to. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to pass it on before I get in trouble with the timing here.
Oh, no, you're
pass
not
it
in
over to
trouble.
Delilah.
Yeah, and actually, before we pass on to Delilah,
Oh, yes,
and while we
sorry.
still have, no, that's okay. While we still have Edie here, I'm going to remove the spotlights and we're going to take a photo. Although we wish we could all take a photo in person, we're going to do it on Zoom. So if you have multiple people in your group, I'll ask that you get together. So let me get into gallery view. And if you don't have your camera on and you'd like to put your camera on just for the photo, we'd love to see your face.
And thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you.
All right. We always got to get a picture, you know. Okay. All right. On the count of 3, or I think, okay. 3, 2, 1. All right, we'll do one more just for, you know, say in case someone blinked. Wait, come back. I don't know if that was Daniel. It's okay. Okay, Dan. All right, he's in the first one, so hopefully the first one was good. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, Logan totally posed for that.
I
All
hope
right.
you're sure.
So I'm going to pass on. Edie, we're about to do our blessing over the wine and challah, which you're more than welcome to join us for. And then we're going to just wrap it up with a little discussion with our guests. So you're welcome to stay, but you're also more than welcome to head out at any point. But thank you so much once again.
Thank you. I'd like to stay for the Kiddush and the blessing.
Amazing.
Great. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Michaela to lead us in Motzi and Kiddush, or to choose others from her group to lead us in Motzi or Kiddush. And then after that, we're going to have a little discussion about like a reflection from what Edie shared with us. So Michaela, take it away.
Thank you, Delilah. Daniel. Okay. So here's the blessing over the wine, or grape juice. I have grape juice. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvoto v'ratza lanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahav v'ratzon hinfilanu zikaron lema'aseh b'leishit. Hila Mikra Kodesh, Zecher Letziat Mitzrayim, Ivanu Vacharta Viotanu Kidashta Mikohamim, V'Shabbat Kodshecha B'Ahava U'B'Ratzon Hinchaltanu, Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. L'chaim. And now, for the blessing over the challah, hamotzi, we're all gonna try to sing it together. Here we go. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, we give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together, as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, v'tei avon Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Thanks, Michaela and Marquette crew. That was beautiful. And we're so glad to see all of your